You're listening to Parasearch Radio with paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web at Parasearch Radio. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the KTPF Reload Show. In case you're wondering what the Reload Show is about, if you haven't heard previous shows, these are the interviews that were conducted by good friends of mine, Steve and Sue Taggart, in the days of the KTPF radio show. Their own radio show ran for just over 4 years, broadcasting every week for over 3 hours. I joined them in the last 18 months of the show's run, but eventually the guys felt they'd just about had enough. It was a monumental effort to keep broadcasting every week for 3 hours. It was a wonderful show. But unfortunately they're no longer involved, and the shows have just sort of sat in the archives, so I thought it would be nice to bring them back to life and bring you the interviews that the guys conducted over those 4 years. They include some of the most interesting people within the world of the paranormal and some not so well known but still, nevertheless still very interesting. We even have 1 or 2 rather unusual shows, including a live seance and other things along those lines. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed tonight's show, and this is the KTPF Reload Show. Enjoy.
This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience. They've landed.
You're in the right place. Online, on the web, and on air. All over the world.
Talk radio.
You hear us, we hear you.
Good evening everyone, and welcome again to another edition of the KTPF Community Talk Show, live from Manchester. My name is Suzanne.
And I'm Steve.
And I'm a very bunged up Andy in Essex.
And we're here keeping the paranormal friendly each and every Sunday. So pull up a chair and relax with us while we bring you a show full of the supernatural, the paranormal and other strange phenomena. Now, I couldn't have done this even if I tried. I only realised yesterday what had happened, but 1450 years ago yesterday, on the 22nd of August 565, St Columba had the first sighting of Nessie, apparently saving a swimmer from becoming its dinner. Since then, legend of the monster was passed from generation to generation, but the creature's popularity reached an unprecedented height in 1933. That year, a new road was constructed beside the loch, and travellers reported more sightings than ever before. Later that year, the infamous surgeon's photo was published, depicting what appeared to be a head and long neck stretching out of the loch's water. In April 1960, while scanning the loch with binoculars, Tim Dinsdale caught sight of an object travelling in a zigzag pattern at a speed estimated to be 7 to 10 miles per hour, and recorded a 60-second sequence on film. Over the next 27 years until his death, the father of 4 made many expeditions from his Reading home to gather further proof that would back up the grainy footage. Angus Dinsdale has monster hunting in his blood. Born on the very day his father presented his famous film to the British nation on the BBC programme Panorama, Angus grew up in a household where searching for the Loch Ness monster was his father's full-time and perfectly acceptable occupation. And tonight he talks about his father Tim, and about his book, The Man Who Filmed Nessie, the legend of the Loch Ness monster, and also about his unusual childhood. Hi, Angus. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Right, welcome to the show, Angus, as I said. It's nice to have you on. and find out more about your book and about your life that you led as a child.
Well, thanks very much. It's lovely to be here. Yes, certainly had an interesting childhood. It's not your run-of-your-mill thing, that's for sure.
No, it's definitely not day trips to Southend and holidays to Clacton, is it?
No, it wasn't. Far from it, yeah.
Right, well, let's just start. Tell us a bit about your father, Tim Dinsdale. Tell us a bit about Tim, your father. I believe that he's an ex-RAF man. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, my father had a really interesting young childhood upbringing. He was his father was in China, Imperial China in the 30s. He was a shipping agent, and my father was brought up there. And there was he had an incident there while he was going to school on a ship, and they were pirated and saved by the Royal Navy, which is a story all within itself. But so he was used to adventure, and when he came home and went to school in the UK, then the war started, and he was training to be in the RAF. And the war ended actually before his training came to the end. He was training to be a fighter pilot, but that never, as I say, never finished. Thankfully, he survived. And he went on after the war and continued in aeronautics, as it at that time the aircraft industry was the sort of, if you like, the computer industry of its day, in the sense that Concorde was being looked at, and the Harrier jump jet, and all of this stuff was going on, and he was right involved with it. And so that was his life.
Yeah. I can understand that. So, now I believe when it came to the Loch Ness Monster, this fascination all started from an article in a magazine.
Well, this is one of the reasons, Susan, that I wanted to write the book, because my father's been known for being, the man who took this incredible film of the monster, or something swimming in the loch, whichever way you want to look at it, and then a lifetime of pursuing it thereafter. The point was that he had a full-on career. He was three children, family life, was doing very, very well. Had worked for Rolls-Royce and numerous other companies, de Havilland and Avros, all big names in the aeronautical industry, and was doing very nicely. Thank you very much. And as it happened was, he was reading a magazine article one day, quite literally, and it was about the Loch Ness Monster, and he handed it over to my mother and said, "What do you think of this? Have a look, have a read." And she read it and looked back and said, why not? Why would somebody lie? There's always all these stories, always been stories about Nessie going around, so why would somebody lie about it? And that rather sparked my father's curiosity, and he then spent the next 12 months doing some research, just as a hobby, literally, nothing more than that. He had a long commute to work on the train, so he used to do some research whilst he was on his commute. And so from that small sort of germ of interest, he set himself a goal, and being an engineer, everything had to be exact. Set himself a goal of researching 100 sighting reports, and which he did do in a year, in the space of 12 months. What he came back with was that there was something very lightly odd, living in the loch. Yeah. This then gave him the sort of thought that, well, I want to go up and take a look, and he left my mother, who was, three children and pregnant at the time with me, for 5 days, and off he went up to Scotland. And his goal of going up there was to literally just take a look at the place and chat to some locals, and just to get a real feel for it. And of course, when he was up there, it was on his last day. He had this his fabled encounter with the monster.
God, how did your mum feel about the fact that your father wanted to search for monsters?
Well, very much so that this was his hobby, if you like. Yeah. When he phoned up to say that I've actually filmed something, she will tell the story that she was 7 months pregnant, and the three little ones under the age of 7, was feeling the need for some support. Was okay, well, good for you, well done, come home type thing, and that's a whole other story what went on after that. But to be honest with you, she was very, very supportive, always has been. And if she hadn't have been supportive, then my father couldn't have done what he did.
Now, you say it was a hobby. Your father gave up his career as an aeronautical engineer to investigate the possibility of a Loch Ness monster, and that goes a bit beyond a hobby, don't you think, Angus?
No, I would absolutely agree with you. I mean, he classed himself as a full-time monster hunter, and he loved to give himself that title. He was always prepared to poke fun at it himself. But he took the subject incredibly seriously. I think the point is to roll it back a little bit and think that he was at Loch Ness for 5 days and had to stay over for a 6th day. He wasn't feeling great, so he stayed on for an extra day, and that's he was driving back to the hotel. He'd been up for what he would call early watch. He was up at 5 a.m. and was going back for his breakfast at 9 o'clock, and was coming on the South Road, which was the old military road. And at one point it goes away from the loch, you can't get a view of it. And as it comes back round, swings towards the hotel, then there's a panoramic view of the loch. And he set his camera up, he had it set up in his car, he'd taken the passenger seat out. And as he came round the corner, he stopped and saw this dark triangular shaped thing in the middle of the loch. It was a very, very still day. There was no waves on the loch at all, no other boat traffic. And he looked through his binoculars, and as he said, he always said it was this sort of back of a buffalo what he was looking at. And whilst he was watching it through his binoculars, it started to move, and that's when he realised that it was an animate object. So he shot his 60 seconds of film. And going back to your other question about it not being a hobby, is that it so affected him what he saw that this was a large living creature in the loch, and he was fully expecting. When you think about it, he went up there for 6 days. He had a hobby of investigating it for 12 months, went up there for 6 days, took this incredible piece of film, which, by the way, he was very disappointed with when he saw it after it had been processed, because he's always maintained it was nowhere near what, he had a borrowed camera, a small lens, it was at great distance, it was nothing compared to what he had seen through these binoculars. So quite rightly, he thought, well, if I go back up there, I'll see it again. So it went from, he was still doing his full-time job, and went up to the loch, but eventually it became that he did give up his job. Yes.
Okay. Now, how old was you when you realised what your father was doing?
Well, the story with me and Nessie goes back to the night I was born, because my father took the film in April 1960, and I was born in June 1960, 2 months later. And some journalists had got hold of the fact that he'd taken this film. He'd shown the film to the naturalist Sir Peter Scott, and who was incredibly interested in it, and said that there was something, we needed to take a look at this. And then because the press got hold of it, my father decided to go public, and the BBC contacted him, and he was on Panorama. Now, the night that he was on Panorama, because it was live television in those days, my mother was decided to enter the world, and my mother was in hospital, and the doctor came in and picked up a chart and was reading a chart, and then looked down at the name, and he said, "Oh, that's interesting. I've just been watching this chap on Panorama called Tim Dinsdale talking about the Loch Ness monster," and my mother said, "Yes, that's my husband." And the doctor pulled up a chair and sat down and started to talk about it. Well, she wasn't impressed with that because she had some other things going on at that time. And wanted to,
so have a baby to get out,
So as I say, in answer to your question, is that on the 14th of June there was two monsters introduced to our house. One that would change us forever, and the other one that would just cause nothing but trouble.
Okay, so while you were growing up, how did you get on with school, telling friends and teachers that your dad hunted monsters?
Yeah, that was a funny one. It was you had that group of kids that thought it was absolutely terrific and really cool. Well, we never used to say cool in those days, but it was an interesting thing to do. And yes, we were a different family, that's for sure. But then you had the other bunch that would just take the mickey, as we do as Brits. We do very much like to put things down, and that happened quite a lot during our school years, and you learn to just roll with those punches.
Yeah. Now, you went on some pretty cool vacations that were full of adventure as a child. Can you talk us through a typical family holiday that involved monster hunting?
Well, we would never call it a family holiday. It was called we were going monster hunting.
Okay.
And I mean, in answering to your earlier question about school friends, I mean, my thing was always, well, you're going on a holiday to Bournemouth, and I'm going monster hunting for 5 or 6 weeks. Who gets the better deal here? I mean, a family holiday would be that normally everyone was slightly different, but we would either meet my father at Loch Ness, he'd already gone up there earlier, or we would all go up together in a car and rent a boat or something, and spend a few weeks at the Loch. What would happen is that your holiday my father made it so exciting for us. We were going as kids to hunt monsters, plain and simple. We all had cameras, we all had binoculars, we all had our jobs to do, literally, and we all took turns in being on watch, because everybody was on watch at some point or other during the time you're at Loch Ness, and when there was the Americans turned up, or French, or different people would turn up with these different experiments, we would be involved with them. We would help them. We would carry equipment. We would be, on the boats. All of this stuff. It was such fun.
Right. Okay. Now, how deep and big is the loch? I've heard that there is more water in Loch Ness than all the other lakes in England, Scotland, and Wales put together, with the bottom being as flat as a bowling green, and that the loch never freezes over. Is this true?
Yeah, it's basically a massive trench.
Yeah.
It's in the Great Glen series of lochs that go right the way across Scotland, and Loch Ness is around mostly around 700 feet deep. It pretty much, there's only a few places at the side of Loch Ness where it goes in shallow. It just goes in gradually. Mostly it's just a straight off the edge. You go in a few feet and down it goes. So for the most part, it's around about 700 feet deep. There are one or two points off Urquhart Castle where it goes considerably deeper than that. There's one being recorded over 800 feet. One spot in Loch Ness. So and another one I think of just around 900. Pretty deep.
Right. Okay. Now, one question I do want to ask you is, during your time there, did you ever see anything?
Well, I was there during my younger years, and with the excitement of having everybody around you, and all of us looking, and during the Loch Ness investigation years, that's when groups of people would come up to the loch, and they'd all stay in caravans, and we were all together. A whole bunch of people would go off each day, and different spots around the loch. That's all you did was talk all day monsters, We were on a family vacation one time. We were in 1968, and we were staying on a big catamaran at Fort Augustus, which is the westernmost end of the loch. And we'd been up at the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau site, which is 3/4 away along the loch. And we were driving back one evening, and the light was just going. And there was 5 of us, 6 of us, and my father had a great big Jaguar at the time, big Mark 9 Jaguar, and they had bench seats. So in the front I was sat between the driver and my father was driving on the chap whose boat it was, Mr. Smith. No seatbelts or anything like that. And we're driving along, and of course, as is everybody's want when you're at Loch Ness, you're always looking towards the water. And the trees had grown up, and we were coming along, and there was one area, it's called Cherry Bay, which is actually fairly shallow where people park their boats, and you can get a good view of the loch. And we came around the corner, and my brother shouted at the top of his voice, "What's that?" And of course, my father driving hadn't seen anything. He put his slammed the brakes on, and the big jag came to a sort of shuddering halt. But we were behind trees, and we all jumped out and ran back. And by the time we got back there, what everybody had seen in the car, except my father, because he was driving, wasn't there anymore. What my brother had seen, and all of us had seen, was this what looked like, the best way of describing it was a boat that was upturned, upside down rowing boat. So within the sort of 10, 15 seconds maximum of seeing it, parking the car and getting back there, it had gone. Whatever it was, wasn't there. Now, you could say it could be a boat, it could be that, it could be the other. But everybody in the car, and that's my mother included, and Mr. Smith, as I said, who was the owner of the catamaran, had all seen it and didn't think it was a boat. We drove back to Fort Augustus, just around the corner, and by the time we got there, it was a flat, calm night, and by the time we got there was a wake coming in that was pitching the big catamaran to and fro. So there was something out there in the water, that's for sure.
Wow.
So that was my closest impression with Nessie, but I was only 8 years old then.
Yeah. Okay. Now, some believe the Loch Ness monster to be a plesiosaur. Do you have any theories of what type of creature it could be, and where could it hide? Where could you hide a monster so big in the water?
Well, let me put this plesiosaur thing. Let me address that.
Okay.
When my father took his film, and if you watch it, you can. I put the film in its entirety on my website, manwhofilmednessie.com, and it shows the comparison, because my father sent a boat out shortly after he filmed the object, and so you could have a comparison. I've got the two comparisons next to each other. Okay. What he said was that in its look, it could be it resembled a plesiosaur. But he said that doesn't make sense, because if it was a plesiosaur, it would be seen, because a plesiosaur was air breathing. In its look, and of course that's been taken and used by everybody that's what it is. And of course in the 1972 picture that the Academy of Applied Science took with the underwater flipper picture, again that sort of brings it back to that sort of idea that it's a plesiosaur type creature. If I'm honest with you, I haven't got a clue what it is, and neither did my father, and all the other people that came up to the loch. You could speculate. I mean, if it was a plesiosaur, it would be an air breather, so it would be seen. So it's not a plesiosaur, but it may resemble it in some way. Where could it hide? Well, my father always used to talk about, we don't know the makeup of the creature. You don't know its metabolic rate. I mean, you look at some snakes. Some large snakes can eat and then not move or do much for the next few months. Same as an alligator will do that, or a crocodile. Well, have a very, very slow metabolic rate. Could this creature have the same, be the same thing? We don't know. I do know that in 1970, the Academy of Applied Science turned up with a young chap then who was a professor at MIT, Dr. Marty Klein, and he had designed a side-scan sonar unit. And during that trip, which my father took him out in his boat Waterhorse, they did find on the walls of the side of the loch some quite cavernous undercuts in that sonar suite. So there's always been that theory that potentially something could be living under there.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Mozzie is in the chat room. He's heard that there isn't enough food, fish-wise, in the loch for Nessie. Is this true? Or is there some way in and out that things are actually flying, swimming in from outside the loch, or is it is it land-bound or whatever your word is?
No, it's
supposed to be landlocked.
Yeah.
It's landlocked. The loch is landlocked. It's recognised that it was more than likely before the last ice age was part of was a fiord, was open to the sea, but the land as the ice moved back, the land came up, and it's been landlocked ever since. I mean, that was a theory that there was that the monsters would have been seagoing and potentially used the loch as a breeding place or whatever. But that's again one of those theories that was thrown around during those years. Sorry, the question was, sorry?
It was asking about the food source that might be in the loch.
Yeah, that again, obviously, a big carnivore would need something to eat, and not having been a part of those scientific experiments myself, but I have read reports where they have come back. I know that Discovery did something in the early 90s, and they came back saying that the fish stocks inside in Loch Ness were quite adequate to maintain a large species of carnivore.
Okay. I was reading some earlier reports this year of sightings, and there was mention that there was maybe a dolphin-like creature in the loch. Well, if it's landlocked, I don't think a dolphin would get in there, would it?
No, I don't know. Yeah.
Apart from which, as far as we know, there isn't a freshwater dolphin.
Precisely. So that would
not one that can stay in it permanently. Anyway,
that would debunk the dolphin theory. Anyway, I thought I'd just throw that in as I just read it. I can imagine the stories that you would have mulled over between you around the table, dinner table. Can you share some with us this evening?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, we grew up with it, right? So it was our everyday thing, and my father was very, cognizant that we had a normal family life.
Yeah,
wasn't taken over by the monster, and he built himself an office out in the back garden there, and that's where the monster was kept. As he called it, Nutter's Nook. That was the name of his office.
Shed, was it?
Yeah, that's his name of his office. It's kind of appropriate, really,
Yeah.
But we would have. It was moreover, I think, when we were involved with the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau, when we would have these big groups of students would come up from London and all over the UK, to be honest with you. Birmingham University did a lot, and they would come up for a week or 2 weeks, and they would give up a bit of their summer to come and help out and go on watch sites, spend the day scanning the loch and what have you. And everybody got into some quite deep conversations over during that period of what could it potentially be, and of course then what you do is you come through all of the logic, and the logic the logic says it's not, it should be seen more often.
Yeah.
Then it's a creature that we don't. Perhaps it's new to science.
Yeah. Now, over the years, what was it? We're talking 27 years at least. How many expeditions did your father undertake?
Father, he was up there 56 times in 27 years. Yeah, and they were just about all self-funded. He kept himself to himself for the most part. Did his own thing, I mean, the reason that he kept going with it was because what he saw when he filmed it in 1960 so affected him. He was absolutely convinced that there was a quite stunning discovery waiting to happen.
Right, okay. Now, unfortunately, his life ended before he was able to solve the mystery, but he left behind a legacy and a body of research, having written several books and extensively lectured on subjects both in the UK and abroad. Can you let our audience know some of the titles in case they would like to know more about his work?
Well, my father he wrote, it was the Loch Ness Monster, 4th edition was the last one he did. And then he did a nice book called Project Waterhorse, which was more about the human aspect that was involved with it. with searching for the monster. He wrote a book called Leviathans, which centered on strange and strange creatures reported around the world. All of them are out of print now, I'm afraid. You'd have to search for them via Amazon and see if you could get second-hand books.
Yeah. Okay. And something that's been mentioned in the chat room, which has been one of my theories, to be honest with you. I'm wondering whether Nessie is a ghost, to be honest with you. Have you ever come across that theory before? Because
absolutely.
What do you think of that?
It's that's an interesting theory. I was on a radio show in the United States about 18 months ago, and this chap phoned in from Oklahoma. He was driving his truck at the time, and he was talking about parallel universes and Nessie passing between a wormhole, and that's why when people see it, it's very real. I think the reality is that all of those things are strange sort of speculations. The point being is that when people see it, it's real. Yeah. And it affects people. It affected my father so much that he was prepared to change his profession, to change his whole family's life. He's met many people who have seen it. I've met people who have seen it. Yeah. Why would they lie? That was my father's thing. Why would people lie? Why would you say this thing knowing you're going to get ridiculed, knowing you're going to get... So there's absolutely a strangeness to it, no doubt about it. Yeah,
we're predominantly investigate ghosts, me and Steve. And we always come to the precinct. There's a lot of people seeing so many sightings of ghosts. Why would they make it up in sort of thing? It's the same with the Loch Ness monster. It's the same with chupacabras and stuff like that. There's too many sightings to actually debunk it, if you understand what I mean.
No, I don't. I fully understand what you mean. I think the point is that where my father went with it is that you have to have solid scientific evidence before the scientific community will take it at any value. And even when you have that, they still pull it to pieces. I mean, you look at the 1972 sonar readings from Bob Rhines and the Academy of Applied Science. This was in Urquhart Bay in Loch Ness, and in about 35 feet of water, a creature passed within. He had a sonar set up with flash photography underwater, and so you have this picture of the side of the animal, and which is backed up with sonar, saying that this is a 30-foot long, whatever with projections being described as humps, and then this picture was taken, and yet even with that, the scientific community debunk it.
Yeah.
I mean, my father used to use the term, a little saying. He would say, if you filmed a Scotty dog running around in the back garden, it would be a Scotty dog. He said that's what we have to have with the monster. So underwater photography is all well and good, and it helps, but it's not going to be definitive.
No, this is it. Now, your father, Tim, he wasn't looking for fame and fortune during this time. Okay, what actually drove him? And on the subject of money, he didn't have a job or anything. So where was he getting the money from to do his hobby?
Well, I mean, there's two questions there. So, what drove him? He wasn't looking for fame or fortune. He was looking for the to prove it, because the 2 years after, so 1960 to 1962, really he took his film to the Natural History Museum, to all of the recognised bodies in the British scientific community, and he was absolutely came up against a brick wall. Now, as I say, he was a very straightforward man. And an honest man, and he wanted to prove what he had seen was true, and the fact that there was a creature in Loch Ness, and the fact that it was something very strange and needed protection. And as he said, he'd seen it. He'd absolutely seen it, and he'd filmed it.
Yeah.
And so his goal was to better that film. How did he make his money? How did he make his living? Well, we scraped, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It wasn't an easy go. There's no doubt about that.
No.
Father made his money from he made some money from book selling, and mostly it was from doing lectures. He would do lecture tours throughout the UK, Europe, and he did 3 in the United States, which were quite lucrative at the time. But make no mistake, it wasn't an easy go. That's for sure.
All right, okay. Now, do you think there should be a new research institute to continue searching for the Loch Ness monster?
I think it would be nice if there was a real scientific a group of people that went into it with an open mind rather than with a cynical side or with trying to disprove it. There's a lot of people that have gone out there and spend their time trying to disprove stuff rather than looking and saying, this is an amazing opportunity to and there's such a body of evidence at it. Why would you do that? Why not look in a scientific way? I mean, I was talking to Marty Klein, who I mentioned earlier, and I haven't spoken to Marty Klein in many years. And he's in his 80s now, but he was the one who designed the side scan sonar. And by the way, it was his design of sonar that Bob Ballard used to finding the Titanic. So he comes in pretty good company. He said to me that after what he'd seen on the charts when he was doing sonar work at Loch Ness, that there's something there. We need to go back and take another look, he said. So in answer to your question, I would love there to be a scientific body up there doing something seriously.
Yeah, because as I say, there's people going out looking for other creatures. So why not Loch Ness? Why not closer to home?
Well, the point is, I think that there's everybody wants a quick result these days, don't they?
Yeah, this is
and they want to turn a quick dollar. And I think with Loch Ness, you've got to be in for the long haul.
Yeah. Now, the first sighting, documented sighting, was 1,450 years ago yesterday, on the 22nd of August, 565. I could never have ever do this again, where I conduct an interview a day after all this time.
Well, the legend starts.
Yeah. Right? When St. Columba supposedly saved a swimmer from becoming dinner. Why do you think the legend has lasted as long as it has?
Well, I think that's pretty easy to answer, isn't it? I mean, it has a history of almost 1,500 years, and during that time, it's been seen, and the legend, the folklore of Nessie has continued through the ages.
Yeah.
And I would say it was because there's something strange in the water.
my daughter-in-law, she's from Glasgow. She believes solely, in the Loch Ness monster. As far as she's concerned, it's their Nessie, and leave it alone, and all this and the other. She really does believe in it. So, have you ever been back to Loch Ness recently?
I haven't recently because I live in Canada at the moment.
Yeah.
But it is on the cards. My brother has recently retired from the police force, and him and I will. He's been up there fairly recently, and him and I will make a trip up there sometime in the near future. We don't have anything specific yet, but we will do. One thing that he did tell me from his visit is that the local council up there have had so many accidents on the North Road, which is the road that hugs the side of the loch, that they've closed off all the laybys now, because what was happening was with people pulling in and then looking at the loch and driving out, and then just having these incredible accidents. Yeah. And they've allowed all the vegetation to grow. So really, the loch is not visible. It's only visible for maybe, he reckoned, around 20%, if that 20% of the loch is visible from the road. So if we go up there, we're going to need a boat.
Yes, definitely. So, would you actually say you believed in Loch Ness Monster?
Of course. I've seen so much evidence. I mean, if you read my book, The Man Who Filmed Nessie, which is about my father, first and foremost, rather than about the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
It's about Tim Dinsdale. And I've included in there a lot of the evidence that was gathered through the 1960s and 70s, which was the heyday of monster hunting. And being a part of it, being there with people, there's no reason to doubt people when they've seen something, as you would appreciate dealing with what you deal with. Why would they lie?
This is it. Yeah. Now, as you say, you live in Canada now, Vancouver, which is said to have its very own Nessie. Are you tempted to continue your father's work closer to home?
Well, let me tell you, Lake Okanagan is where Okopogo is reputed to live, and Lake Okanagan is in a gorgeous part of the country with many wineries. Now, I will hold my hand up to admit to visiting a number of those wineries, and during that time, I've also always kept the habit of having a camera close by, which was my father's mantra. You never went anywhere without a camera that wasn't within an arm's length, and that's always done that at Lake Okanagan. To be honest with you, Lake Okanagan these days is so populated, so busy. It's monster hunting on Lake Okanagan, I don't think would be fruitful. But I've got a nice story for you. I do a lecture on my book, The Man Who Filmed Nessie, and I was talking to a group of people about 6 months ago in Canada, and this chap, I was asking some questions at the end, and this chap, he said, I don't have a question, I just want to tell you this little story. He was probably in his early 80s, and he said that he had been an RCMP officer for his career, and him and his wife had been they'd been camping in Lake Okanagan in the 50s. Well, during that time, the 50s, it would have been pretty quiet there, and he and his wife were out swimming one day, and they saw something, sort of the classic undulating humps going the opposite way to the way the wind was blowing and the ripples were moving. So they turned around and headed for the shore pretty sharpish, and then went to grab his camera, and he turned around, and what he had seen had gone. And he then told me that was the first time that he had repeated that story, and that was he'd seen it in 1952. So again, why would somebody make something like that up?
Yeah, definitely. There's a question in the chat room. I'm not sure whether it's to you or whether it's to somebody else in the chat room, but you'll know if it is. What do you reckon on Adrian Shine? Do you know about Adrian Shine?
Yeah,
he seemed a character, apparently.
Adrian is a character, for sure. No, I haven't met Adrian for many, many years. I met Adrian originally in the early 70s, very early 70s. He was a student at the London University as a biology student, and he was working at Loch Morar. Loch Morar is reputed to have something strange in there as well.
Yeah.
And he was with the Loch Morar investigation. Loch Morar survey is what they were called. Mm-hmm. And they did 2 or 3 years in Loch Morar, and then he came over to Loch Ness. And Adrian stayed on. He stayed at the Loch. He hasn't left. He's been there 40 odd years. Yeah. And he works with he works closely with one of the exhibition centres.
Right. Okay. You've gone through these questions really well. Do you know that? I've got one more question left for you. Your book. I got one. Oh, you've got a question, have you? Go on then. Ask your question.
Well.
Hi, Angus.
Hello there.
Yeah. Of all the things that what could be the loch, given the choice and the evidence that you have, what would you say it is? I mean, we've heard sturgeon, we've heard catfish, we've had all sorts of different things that it could be that we've been told.
Well, I would, again, it's pure speculation, and on seeing a couple of photographs, on listening to people's eyewitness accounts, and one of them being my father's own. He had a second close encounter with Nessie from his boat very, very quickly in 1971. Didn't manage to get a photograph, but there's been a couple of other photographs, one an anonymous photograph, and it really does make me think that it could very possibly be an oversized eel of some sort, or a hybrid eel of some making, you know. And again, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I haven't been trained in this, and all I'm saying is from what I've looked at from my research and the evidence that I've seen, and it kind of makes a bit of sense, but then again, it doesn't.
Well, your dad described it. Can I just say, your dad described it as like a black anaconda, very quick, 2 to 3 feet out of the water, a speed of about 10 miles per hour, 6 foot width, 3 foot above the surface and 2 foot below.
Well, you've got two accounts there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the one where it was 10 miles an hour, that was measured by the RAF, Royal Photographic boys, the RAF long range photographic experts, Jarrett, in 1966, and they measured that what he filmed was moving between 7 and 10 miles an hour, and it was standing between 3 and 5 feet out of the water, and if you could put a cut through the middle of it, it would be about 6 feet wide. That was his sighting in 1960, the one that he filmed.
Yeah.
The other one, and I know what you're talking about, was there's a really nice clip on YouTube of my father talking. He's standing in his boat, Waterhorse, and that was for a Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World series in 1980. And my father was talking about there was when in 1971 he had a very brief sighting of a head and neck, as he would call it, and that was where it said it came up like an anaconda, came up and then went down splash into the water, and that was about 200 feet from his boat. So there's two descriptions there.
Right, okay.
Yeah, there's a fish, or an animal called a ribbon fish, which is can go a good 20-30 feet long. I think that, I don't know whether it can survive in fresh water, but that would actually do a lot of the sightings, I think.
Very, very possibly. Again, you know, I'm not a scientist. I don't know all the species of that. I just look at the evidence that I've looked at and come up with my sort of, you know, best guesstimate, if you
like. Yeah,
like.
because the ribbonfish is eel-like to look at.
Yeah. Okay.
It's weird looking thing.
We have 2 more questions in the chat room. Andy says
I am here.
he is there. Go on, you ask it, Andy.
Hello, Angus. I'm the third person in the show. I've been rather quiet tonight because I've got a stinking cold, so I'm trying to save my voice a bit. But my question really is, do you think it's one creature or a whole family or generation of creatures? Because it seems to me if it's just the one, it's lived for a hell of a long time.
You know, again, now that, you know, going back to the question I was asked earlier, what was our talk around the dinner table like? Well, in the mess hall at Loch Ness Investigation Bureau, that was a question that was banded around. Of course, you know, we had scientists did turn up to the loch, and some people from the States who were very highly qualified, and of course that was a question that was thrown around. I think Tim used to think about, sort of say that he thought there was possibly, you know, potentially like a couple of big bull animals that had an area, because there used to be often sightings in Urquhart Bay or around Urquhart Bay, off Foyers, which is about, if you don't know the geography of Loch Ness, that's about 5 miles away, and then from Foyers down another 5 or 6 miles or so, maybe even further than that, 10 miles, down by the Fort Augustus end, we'd get another sighting. So he would toy with the idea that perhaps they were, you know, sort of regions, areas where a big bull would patrol and have their own area. makes kind of sense, in the animal kingdom.
So it's like the possibility that it's more than one, that they've got several, and they have their own territories.
I think it would have to be more than one, don't you? I think it would be, to keep the population going, yeah.
It's the same one that St. Columbus saw 1,000 years ago. That's a hell of a life.
Yeah.
The other thing I was just going to briefly mention, when I finished school at 16 years old, myself and my friend Alan, we were going to come up to Loch Ness and camp for a week. We never got around to doing it, but we did talk about it quite seriously on our first sort of summer break after finishing school, before getting jobs, but we just never did it. But yeah, we're fascinated about it when I was quite a lot younger. But just want to ask a question that Don's actually typed in here, which I'm sure Susan was going to ask, but how do you feel about the fact the surgeon photograph has turned out to be a fake, considering it's probably the most famous photograph? I think it's terrific. I think it adds to the mystery. I think it's a shame that it's a fake, but it was almost too perfect. Always, the shape of it was almost, as I say, yeah. And I'm quite fine with it. I think that just adds to the mystery, because it doesn't take away all the other stuff. It doesn't take away, you watch my father's film, and as I say, you can watch that on my website, which is manwhofilmednessie.com, and the whole film, and it's enlarged and what have you, and you draw your own opinions of it. It wasn't a boat, because the boat goes out right after it, and you can see it wasn't a boat. So really, I just think that the surgeons, the whole story around with the surgeon, with Marmaduke Wetherell and the big game hunter who was ridiculed in the press, getting his own back, against the Daily Mail and all of this stuff. I think it's just terrific. It's fun story. Sure. I must admit, I remember seeing in the news with the underwater photographs you were talking about earlier on, with the flipper and the possible head, and being absolutely fascinated by those images. They were never really, as you said, they were kind of just dismissed as being mistaken, but the particular flipper was, once it was enhanced, it was very clearly a flipper. It wasn't anything else. But I found those really fascinating. It's a shame that not more research has been done. So, yeah. Well,
Andy, I would agree with you on that one. I think roll back the years and go back to 1972, when the Academy of Applied Science, which was headed by a chap called Bob Rines, when they presented the flipper picture, he'd had it computer enhanced before he presented it, and that, I'm afraid, was its undoing. This day and age, today, you would immediately enhance it. You wouldn't even think twice about it. Yeah. It would be, why aren't you doing it? Back then, it was seen as tampering with the evidence.
Yeah.
And it really scuppered the whole thing.
It's a real shame, but you can see the original, and it is hard to distinguish, but you can see there's something there. As I said, present that first, and then perhaps gradually enhance and show the process of enhancing as you demonstrate for the first time, rather than simply saying, here's the picture enhanced, what do you think? Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'll hand you back to Sue, though, because my nose is running.
Okay. Now, as we say, I'm going to finish off about your book now, in regards to the fact that it's 256 pages, roughly, and it contains no less than 80 photos, I believe. And as you said before, it does include your father's earlier life, too.
I told you that story about or I touched on the story about his piracy. What I've done is giving you a very couple of short chapters of his early life, so that so the reader can understand the man. You're not just looking at the Loch Ness monster. You're talking about a man who goes up, who has a family, and of course, then I can also add to that because I was there.
Yes, definitely. So, can you tell us where we can get your book, and let our listeners know where they can find more information?
Yeah, go to the website is themanwhofilmednessie.com. The best place to buy the book, I'm afraid I have to say, is Amazon, because in the UK the book's being printed in Canada, so you have to get it via Amazon at the moment. But that's the best place to go. Okay.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Angus. I've really looked forward to tonight because I do have a passion with the Loch Ness monster. Have done ever since I was a child. So it's been a dream come true to speak about it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Depth, so I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you.
With what you're doing and what you're planning to do. So hopefully, if you do catch anything on your next trip to the Loch Ness, you might tell us all about it.
I will do if when I go up to the Loch, which will probably be in about a year to 18 months' time. What I'll do is, to all of the radio stations and people that I've talked to about my book, I will contact and follow up and let you know what goes on. Watch this space. We might be doing something.
Okay. Well, enjoy the rest of your time back in the UK, and
thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Good night from me.
And it's good night from her.
Until next time, all that's left to say is
keep the paranormal friendly. Good night, everyone. Take care.
This is where it's at.
You're listening to Parasearch Radio with paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web at Parasearch Radio.